How y'all doing? This is Richmond and I am coming at you with another budget video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Panasonic Lumix FZ1000. This is a 25 to 400 millimeter bridge camera with a 1-inch 20 megapixel sensor. It has 4K 30 frames per second and it does take raw photos. It has a built-in flash. It also has a single SD card slot and a rather smaller battery. It does come with the micro HDMI port and a microphone port, also with in-body stabilization and the ability to have manual focus and manual zoom on top of the motorized zoom function. Alright, the reason why I'm reviewing this camera body is because I've had this camera body for a number of years. I find it to be extremely useful as a photographer. I found it useful when I was making the switch over from, using phones to do a lot of the social media photography that I was doing to actual more professional cameras to do, not professional cameras, but more so on the line of being able to submit professional quality material to people that were prospectively looking to work with me. So before we get started, I would just like to thank God for the ability to take these amazing photos. If it wasn't for Him, I wouldn't have been able to take any of these amazing photos, so thank God for that. Alright, we have the 5 categories. The 5 categories are going to be the affordability of this camera. We're going to take a look at the accessibility, the build quality, the versatility, and then last, which is a new category, but only for camera bodies, is going to be image quality, because it does have a sensor. You can have an amazing glass on an amazing lens. You put on a bad camera body, you're not going to be able to take the best pictures. Alright, so first off, let's go with the affordability. I would rate this an 8 for affordability because I was able to find copies that are battle damaged for about 200 bucks. And then if you want to go on the higher end, you can find it for 700 if you want to be price gouge. I bought mine for 6 a number of years ago. You could probably pick up a good copy that I would feel safe with around $300 to $500. If you're good at fixing things, you could probably pick up one of those $200 ones, but you might end up with dust on the sensor, which I'll get into a little bit later. So not necessarily terribly unaffordable, especially with the fact that you get a Leica lens that's a 25 to 400 millimeter that's literally crisp the entire focal range. You will not find that anywhere else. So that is absolutely awesome. I don't know if I mentioned this before, I cannot recall, but the f-stop is a 2.8 to 8. So that might be something that I forgot to mention initially. So next, let's go into the versatility. Like I just said, the f-stop is a 2.8 to 8. So I rated the accessibility on this an 8. Not necessarily just for that f-stop, but the accessibility, or the reason why I rate this an 8, is because it has this amazing intelligent auto mode. So once you switch it to this, you literally could shoot everything, all the stills you want, just like you were shooting a phone practically. The one issue is that f-stop number 2.8 to 8. So when you're trying to stop down or stop up, it's very difficult to get this aperture or to be able to shoot in a ton of light. It does come with a lens hood, and you are able to use 62 millimeter filters, which I happen to do. Is I use 62 millimeter filters all the time. And I have this pretty dark UV polarized filter on here already, and it stays on the camera just because of that issue. I noticed that having it on there eliminates that f-stop issue, but it is what it is. But other than that, it does have the dials. So it does have a still dial, a multi-shot dial, a bracketed dial, also a timer, and a time lapse. So it has a dial dedicated just for those shooting modes, which is super easy instead of having to go into the menus to find that. Also, when you start shooting on aperture priority and manual mode, it'll be really easy to adjust that ISO. The ISO is clearly marked. You can also adjust the shutter speed in the f-stop, the aperture, by just clicking this dial, twisting, clicking again, and twisting for each respective one. Super simple to do. It has 2 shutter buttons, one for stills, one for the recording function. The recording function works in most modes, and it also has a dedicated recording mode on the dial that you can use the regular shutter for. It does have the ability to switch between zoom and focus on the manual zoom and focus ring, turn off and on in-body stabilization. It has an awesome viewfinder with a viewfinder button, which I know a lot of Sony people will be amazed at. It has an articulating screen that allows you to shoot in most situations, and the ergonomics are really nice. So I really like it for that, and that's why I give it an 8. So the next thing I will say is we're going to talk about the build quality. This has a pretty sturdy build quality. Like I said before, the ergonomics are great. The in-body stabilization works fantastically, and you have a very nice LCD screen. It is not a touch screen, and it does have a really nice viewfinder. It seems to be true to life from what I've seen, and it does have a motorized zoom, which I haven't had any issues with so far. So that is fantastic. Now the negative side to it is that when you extend it like this and you bring it in, just like every telephoto lens, you are going to create a vacuum. That can cause it to accumulate dust inside that body area, so make sure that's nice and clean. And then if you happen to get dust on the sensor, it is extremely hard to get it out unless you know the techniques. So one thing I've found that worked is if I stick my little blower in here and I blow on it until the dust kind of moves around, it'll get rid of it that way. Or I've seen people on the forums, what they've suggested is turning it off and then smacking it on the bottom usually dislodges some of that dust. But if you remember, if you see a dust spot at the top of your photo, it's actually at the bottom of your sensor. If you see it at the bottom of your photo, it's at the top of your sensor. So smack it respectively. Just something to remember. So with that being said, the fact that it is not dustproof, weatherproof, and you cannot clean the sensor easily, I would give it a 7.5 on the build quality. Not horrible. It is going to last you quite some time, but if you have a ton of dust on the sensor, you will have to send it in to get cleaned, or you have to take it apart yourself, which is a little bit of a disadvantage. All right, so next let's talk about the versatility. The fact that it does come with such a crisp, clear 25 millimeter to 400 millimeter Leica lens makes this one of the most versatile cameras I've ever had. And that's the reason why I bought it. I was looking into whether or not I wanted to get a lens system or if I was going to just get a bridge camera. And at the time, I didn't have a ton of money to devote to photography. So I decided I was going to go with this bridge system, get this amazing lens that was extremely versatile, see what kind of photographer I wanted to be, and use it for all sorts of things. And I found out I just like shooting all sorts of different types of photography. Not necessarily wildlife. I'm not big on wildlife. I find it very difficult for me to shoot birds. I'm very bad at shooting birds. I don't know why, but I do enjoy being a street photographer, shooting street or doing portraits. I do enjoy doing that. I do enjoy doing some video. That's another reason why I really like the image quality from this, because it does 4K at 30 frames per second, which is super nice. 20 megapixels, you're gonna get crisp, clear pictures all the time and not have any issues with that. The sensor is great. The image processor is the one thing that I will say is when you hyper pixel peep, when you're really looking at the pictures, you do get a almost brushed pixel, not necessarily a hard solid pixel. So I don't know if that necessarily is I know it's the processor. I don't think it really takes away from the photos that much, but I've noticed they're not super, how do you say, hyper crisp like you would see with the G9 or the Pentax KP. They can be a little watercolored, I would say, is watercolored pixels, I would say, which is not bad at all, because I have a 3x2 or 1 meter by 1/2 meter picture printed out of my children, blown up, and it looks fantastic. There's no issues whatsoever. So when you are submitting it to clients, or if you're putting on Instagram, they will not complain about the image quality at all, as long as you get it in focus. An in focus picture, they will not complain. Same thing with the video quality. They won't complain very much about the video quality. I will say, if you're shooting sports, I haven't had any issues with any of the fitness videos I've done. Usually I can just crank it down to 1080, and then when I throw it in DaVinci, I crank out 1080 anyways, because most people are going to post it to Instagram, so they don't necessarily care. But if you do have a client that needs to have the highest picture resolution or the highest video resolution at 4K and all that stuff, that is something to think about. And then it doesn't have log, so that's another thing to think about if you're shooting videos. With that being said, I gave it an 8 for the image quality. It's a great sensor. It's 1 inch. It lets in tons of light. The f-stop issue is the only issue I find, is having that filter to kind of cut out the light so you don't get super blown out images or videos is the only thing I would highly recommend for this camera. 62 millimeters, that's all you have to get. That's it. No other ones, because it's the only lens. So with that all being said, I gave this bad boy an 8. And would I recommend it for a beginning photographer? Absolutely. It'll teach you how to do a lot of things that you would absolutely translate over into a lens system, or moving into other things that involve photography. Being able to overcome the challenge of that f-stop issue is also going to be huge, teaching you some really valuable lessons on light when it becomes as a photographer. And then also the cool thing is like a lot of this stuff is adjustable, which I'm pretty amazed about. I can adjust the flash like I would, manually adjust the flash like I would if I had an on-body flash or a off-body flash. I would be adjusting it just like this one, stop down, stop up, which is awesome. I can adjust the aperture, I can adjust the shutter speed. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn off of this camera that'll translate over into you buying a more expensive system. And it's great because you can experiment and see what type of photographer you are. If you imagine, hey, I'm gonna get into photography because I really like the way birds look, and then you start taking pictures of birds with a camera like this and find that that's not what you like, then you would instantly save a ton of money on buying those super amazing telephoto lenses that you can get for birds necessarily. So that is the huge thing about that, and it ends up being a fantastic backup camera in the future when you do invest in a new system. Next, as a professional or semi-pro or prosumer photographer, I would 100% suggest this if you can pick it up for a good price. As you see, I was more than confident to take it with me on my Hawaii trip to review it. I have years of footage and videos with this camera, but I decided I would use some of my more modern techniques in which I've learned, and I used this camera without fail, and it performed absolutely beautifully in every situation except for macro situations would be the only situation where I had a little bit of issues just because of that f-stop. Other than that, I would highly recommend it. It's a great B-roll camera. You have the one issue of not having log, but other than that, it's fantastic. All right, so there's that, guys. Thanks for tuning in for that portion of the video. All the photos that you've seen throughout the video are going to also be at the end of the video. Not every single one, but majority of these photos. I don't want the video to be 30 minutes long. I am doing a new series. I am going to be doing an assignment series, hopefully with you guys, so we can get some interaction. This is a book by Brian Laurie Duckett, and all it is it's going to give me an assignment every week, a new video every week with an assignment that we can all do together and hopefully collaborate. I would love to show your pictures and shout you out on whatever you have, social media, YouTube. I don't mind shouting people out, and hopefully we get some inspiration and amazing pictures from this assignment series. So there'll be a whole playlist for that one as well. Thanks again for watching, guys. God bless, and I'll see you soon. Yes.